Welcome to Season 2 of the Crypto Pulse podcast, your ultimate guide to the world of crypto, Bitcoin, and world economics. We're here to guide you through the crypto universe with thought-provoking topics, in-depth knowledge, and information to help you make informed decisions. We'll also be interviewing some of the best minds in the industry, such as CEOs of crypto projects, traders, economists, authors, and development teams from around the globe. And now for the episode.
This episode is brought to you by Yield App, and daily compounding interest on your digital assets with its intuitive web platform and their newly launched mobile app, which is available for download on both iOS and Android. Plus, don't forget to refer your friends to earn extra rewards. Visit yield.app for more information. Gentlemen, welcome to the Crypto Pulse podcast. Adam, Abraham, Douglas, it's great to see you all here. We were just chatting off air before I pressed the record button, and I said it's not usual that we have 5 people on a podcast interview. So this is a bit of a first for us. In fact, we've done them a few times. They're normally really good fun. So just to kick off, then it would be great for us to do a few introductions so our listeners can understand your backgrounds and where you're from and what your roles are in DNA. So Adam, did you want to kick off for us today?
Yeah, Kevin, Ben, thank you for having us. We're very excited to be here. I'm Adam Joannou. I'm the CEO of DNA. My background is in finance and commodities, so supply chain, bringing supply chain to the blockchain. Douglas and Abraham are my co-founders.
Thank you, Kevin and Ben. I'm Douglas Jakobi, the COO of DNA. My background is also in commodities, but more recently I've also ventured into entrepreneurship, focused on consumer goods. So very excited to be joining DNA on this journey.
Hi everyone. Again, nice to meet you. Thank you for having us. I'm Abraham. I'm a software developer. I used to work as a software consultant for insurance companies. And in 2012, I started doing startups. And now this new startup with these guys, which are amazing, CDO with the DNA currently.
Perfect. So how did you guys meet each other and get involved in the crypto space? Because you've got you don't seem to have a lot of people have gone into this space because they've worked in tech or in blockchain before. So what's the story, Adam?
Well, it kind of reminded me of your podcast you've done recently about how you and Ben met and how you kind of got set up. It's really one of those Steve Jobs connect the dots moments, right? So obviously Douglas and I work in commodities, which is a real mess. You're always struggling to find provenance. Documentation's always crap. And you wonder why something like blockchain is not massively adopted to solve all these issues. So we had a certain sensitivity to that. Both Douglas and I, are long-term crypto adepts and really believe in that space. And funnily enough, so Abraham I met while I had invested in a startup, which was doing a search engine for charts. They were in the same incubator. And I met Abraham in kind of summer of 2017. I spoke to him for 10 minutes. He was trying to explain to me what he did, which at the time was a proto NFT. I totally didn't understand what he was doing. I thought he was completely nuts because it was 2017. I was like, why would anyone want to own a picture that's on the blockchain? Anyway, so he was well ahead of the curve and proved us completely wrong. And it's actually, I think, Abraham should speak about that because it's a pretty good story of how he got into that and all the issues that he kind of faced working on at the time what was Ethereum protocols. But anyway, so, years later, Douglas and I were actually looking at a project together. And this is, last year as NFTs were blowing up. And we thought to ourselves, this is kind of the next iteration of the blockchain. The first was the cryptos. The second is this use case of the NFTs, which was giving a lot of power to creators. And what we were always interested because of our commodities background was the utility aspect of the blockchain, which I think is kind of the next big revolution. I think we're just on the cusp of what's achievable. And so we're really, really excited to kind of dig into it deeper. But obviously, as you pointed out, we're not tech guys, so we needed someone to validate it. So, we had come across Kadena, which had a lot of promise, a lot of the issues that some of the protocols were dealing with, that the NFT market was showing us had limitations. So we just needed someone to vet it and to tell us if this was a technology would be viable for mass adoption and wide scale uses. So that's where Abraham came in. It took a little bit of convincing at the beginning because he didn't know Kadena, and he had a lot of frustrations working on building NFTs. But after a month of doing his due diligence, he went from not receptive to lukewarm to, in his own words, being all in.
Amazing. I honestly think coming outside of the tech space gives you a really unique perspective on business in this space. I mean, Ben and I have both got businesses which have absolutely nothing to do with blockchain particularly, and we founded companies. I mean, I founded a company in the environmental and renewables sector, and that whole sector was so lagging behind in terms of tech. But when you've got that experience and background and you combine it with what you're learning and what's going on in the world and some of the new innovations, I think it gives you a unique perspective on how things can fit together. So on that note, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you're trying to do and some of the problems that you're trying to solve with DNA.
Yeah, of course. So just going back on your point here, obviously when you come from the industry, or when you look at it from a legacy business, you see a lot of the problems. And if you have a certain understanding for new technology, you can kind of start to connect the dots and see how that technology can be used to serve the purposes within your own market and solve a lot of issues. So, that's kind of how we approached it. And I think it's also what's very compelling about Kadena in general, because when you kind of listen to Stuart and Will and how they talk about Kadena, they're really trying to build a technology that essentially is, purposed for the real world.
Right.
And at the moment, crypto, when you look at the adoption versus kind of where the internet was, we're in the early 90s, so it's still very much a novelty, right, for blockchain technologies. So, with that kind of angle, what we looked at was we really were focused on the utility case of, at the end, the blockchain is a database, it's immutable, it's solid, it's secure, and it takes out a lot of issues, in transactions where you lack trust or potential transparency on provenance and certain things like that. So that's kind of the angle we went for. Obviously, because it's a nascent market, we had to kind of look at the different actors and how they're incorporating these technologies into their businesses. And what we found is that, the first adopters were really the luxury space, because for two reasons. The first is that they have a massive issue with counterfeiting. It's, a massive issue. LVMH alone spends about $17 million just on lawyers annually just to fight counterfeiting. So, it's a massive cost. But the other aspect of this is that you can take something that essentially helps you with your cost or your problems, and also uses it as a tool for other things. So, I think like the next kind of iteration of that is a CRM aspect, the customer relationship management, where this gives you a direct access to your end customer, and you don't even need to sell to them directly. You can do it through a third party and have that connection. So, our main focus really has been to look at anti-counterfeiting and the tokenization of physical items. If I'd say our USP is to give anyone the ability to mint a physical product into a unique token anywhere. So, we needed our platform to be accessible, that, that it doesn't exclude anyone who has no knowledge or understanding of the blockchain, that they would be, able to use it day one, and also to create something that ultimately could be used for anything. And that's why, we were drawn to Kadena as our blockchain technology, because of the ability to have scalability in that blockchain. We also found out that, for our customer base, a big deal is the ESG side. Obviously, we're more in tune with climate change and the issues that entails. And, a big kind of pushback on the technology is the environmental impact. So, that kind of explains why we thought that we were at a point where, you know, we kind of ticked all the boxes, and we saw anti-counterfeiting as kind of the first stepping stone in a journey where, you know, tokenization would become commonplace across a lot of markets and a lot of different products.
So can you tell us a little bit about the sectors that you're working with? I know that you mentioned things like luxury brands, but is the use case primarily around that, or are you looking at other sectors and industries as well? Because you kind of, I guess the problem's so huge and the market's so big, it's like, where do you even begin with this?
Okay, that's exactly the biggest problem we face, to be honest. Okay. You know, where do you start? So it's, you know, there are so many use cases for it. And, you know, there are two kind of factors. The first is how big is the problem? And the second is who's willing to adopt it. So as I said, the luxury space has been the first to adopt it. And then within that, you can kind of break it down into subsectors. This is a really high-end stuff. There's, you know, all the kind of limited production stuff that's highly coveted and highly traded in secondary markets, where, you know, a lot of these brands want to have some visibility over that. And then there are artists as well that, you know, essentially want to also be able to participate in their resale markets and have seen the power of the NFT and think that, you know, this is a way to not only protect their own opus, but also create a way to, you know, to participate in that secondary market and make sure that, you know, they're properly rewarded for their creativity. We're also seeing kind of like weird other use cases are coming. So, you know, we're talking to e-mobility company we're working with. And for them, it's, you know, again, to kind of support their secondary market, but also just, you know, for them to be able to kind of keep records of all their bikes, for their owners to have, you know, what would be kind of like a deed, and to be able to keep all the servicing that's ever happened to their e-bike on the blockchain. We have, you know, we spoke to an industrial company that has a product that every year needs to be recertified. So yeah, there are a lot of use cases, and at the moment we're, you know, we're working with different ones to see what, you know, what's the best place to start. But Douglas, you can talk maybe about, you know, the pilots that we've done, and actually we also have another exciting one which got confirmed last week.
Yeah, so we in fact went live with our first pilot customer a few weeks ago. It was Steve Olson, who's a pioneering skateboarder, now turned artist. And we basically partnered with him for 14 of his pieces of art in a collection called The Beautiful Explosion. And what we did is we basically created digital certificates of authenticity, so stored on our platform. And it was pretty simple, but it went down very, very well. And the reason why he wanted to work with us is because he obviously didn't want anyone to replicate his art. And he was very interested in also participating in royalties in the future, which is something that we can integrate onto the smart contracts. So that was our first, if you will, that was our first experience with the customer. We have quite a few different brands and pilots that we will be working with. The next one that we're building for is a luxury jeweler based in Austria, and we're working on a one-of-one piece. It's a 50-carat Paribas ring, which will be auctioned with a very reputable auction house, which I can't say who that is, but
one of the big ones, I'm guessing.
One of the big ones.
You can, as of last week, you can, Douglas.
We can? Okay. Well,
yeah, we can.
It's Sotheby's.
We've got an exclusive on the show. Amazing.
There we go.
Yeah, there you go.
And it's going to be taking place either in Hong Kong in October or in Geneva in November. So we're very, very excited about that, because obviously, you know, that's another example of a different type of customer that we're targeting, which is an auction house. And there's a huge use case there as well. So we have a lot that we're working on. Those are just two examples. And obviously our intention is to is to build for customers, but also, release new features on our platform over the next 6 months.
That was actually quite an interesting one. Shalene, this jeweler that's going to be auctioning this one-off ring, because originally they came to us with, they had an issue where someone used their IP. So the owner turned around and he said, well, if I had all my designs on the blockchain, then I could prove that, there was a day that these were created. And that turned into creating the tokens for their jewelry and a way to access basically the next generation of buyer. So it's really interesting to see how all these different brands see the potential of a blockchain in a different way, and the use cases that it can bring to their business.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Adam. Just based on the discussions that you guys are having with auction houses and artists, what are the current techniques that these people are using to prevent theft and copyright fraud and counterfeiting? What are they currently doing, and why is blockchain a better solution?
Well, it comes down to lawsuits, expertise in house, right? Because when you see it, the resale market is really blown up, and it's growing more and more. And there are a bunch of companies, mostly in the States, that enable these resale markets. And essentially, you're taking a huge gamble because it goes through an individual who's an expert who validates this product, whether it's authentic or not. And then there's paperwork as well that comes with it, proof of transaction. So, to be honest, it's quite shaky, right? At the end, it's the force of arguments and the burden of proof. But the blockchain can change that, because the way we've set it up, it's that only a brand can mint this token. So and this token would have, in its most simplest form, just information about the item that's unique to it. They say that possession is 9/10 of the law, but we're planning to change that the token also is your proof of ownership, right? So that when you decide to resell it or take it in for servicing, that at least you have this extra kind of security measure to prove that you are the rightful owner. Then you can also add anti-counterfeiting tools, right? So depending on your product, the sophistication, the price point, you can get pretty sophisticated. And I think that actual market is really also in its infancy, because every day there are new technologies that come out that allow you to kind of figure out the grain of leather that comes from a certain cow, or pick up on subtleties in the signature of an artist. So all those tools are getting better, and the blockchain allows you to store it in a way that no one can tamper with it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just pick up on the point that you talk about that sort of resale market, and presumably that resale market, as we kind of move towards sustainability, especially in things like fashion, that space is only going to grow. And I guess for brands that are creating luxury goods, presumably they're going to want to find clever ways to ensure that people are buying the original. Are you guys thinking about how you can integrate your technology with third-party marketplaces, platforms like eBay and other sort of third-party sellers?
Look, definitely. It's I think it's still early stage for that. At this point, it's really about creating tokens that are not only secure but also coveted. I think there's an experiential aspect to it that's very, very important, and that's being developed as we speak. Problem with exchanges, and that's why also we think our token is very, very well placed to suit the needs of a lot of brands. Is that when you look at more of the Ethereum-based protocols, not the policies that dictate the behavior of the tokens are not written onto the blockchain. So certain times you find yourself kind of at the whim of the marketplace, where they can decide that these are rules that just don't work for them. So that's something Abraham is quite sensitive to, because when he was doing his NFT tokens, the key thing that they were really trying to build was royalties and the enforceability of royalties. In our tokens, that's inbuilt into the token. So it means that if you don't respect, whatever the minter had put in as those conditions, so if, royalties due to the artist, then the token can't be transferred. And I think that's, it's a very, very powerful tool to kind of protect IP and make sure that, people use them as they're supposed to be. I also think kind of, about brands who have issues, like, one brand that comes to mind is like Ferrari, for instance, where sometimes, they'll make you buy like 6 different Ferraris before giving you a special one, right? And the tokens is one way of guaranteeing that you keep ownership of that and that you can reward that loyalty. So I think it's extremely powerful what these brands can do, and I think it's potentially less about the marketplace and more about creating a better bond and greater trust and greater kind of a deeper relationship between the brand and its end customer.
I want to say a big thank you to YieldApp for sponsoring this podcast. Now, we may be in the midst of a bear market, but that's no reason to stop earning on your digital assets. YieldApp allows you to earn daily compounding interest on the biggest digital assets at the click of a button. YieldApp is a licensed fintech company built by a team with a strong background in traditional finance. YieldApp offers instant asset conversions, fiat on-ramp, auto compounding, and security features such as activity log, transaction history, and more. Simply deposit your digital assets and click to start earning daily rewards. And you can earn up to 1,000 of their native token, YLD, by referring your friends to YieldApp. You will also automatically join their monthly referral competition for a chance to win massive prizes. I've heard this use of blockchain for luxury items and vehicles and, watches and things like that. This idea has come has been sort of presented to us over the years, I think, by different people. Is there anyone else in this space trying to do what you're doing? And if so, what is unique about what you're doing, and how are you going to position yourselves as like the go-to leader?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, like the bear market did help a little bit because earlier this year it was kind of a free for all. And there's obviously a lot of noise, everybody hyping their projects. There are a few that are looking at it from different aspects. A lot has been done on the diamond space. Obviously the situation in Ukraine has created a lot of pushback on anything from Russia. A lot of diamonds tend to come from Russia. So, the high-end jewelry market really wants to try and create better oversight over the supply chain, right? Because that's what the customers want. So there are companies working on that. LVMH is working on their own solution, and they've signed up a big consortium of companies to get behind it. It seems to be very focused on a few brands at the moment, and we haven't necessarily seen them in the market. And then there are a few other competitors who are also looking more at the luxury side of it. So what distinguishes us is the ability to go mass adoption. We can mint pretty much any product. Thanks to Kadena. And we also build it to be extremely accessible because, coming from a non-technical background, ultimately for this to gain widespread adoption, it means that, we have to get beyond the diehard fans and to a certain extent, give access to people who have never even bought a crypto to these products, right? And also, like, I think for them, it's also the novelty of feeling like they can do it as well is very, very important. So I think that's probably our biggest selling point is that we've really designed this that if you're a complete noob, you won't be daunted by it. You can have access to it, and you can if you're a brand, mint the tokens, and if you're an end user, receive them and not have to worry about infrastructure and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think that kind of like usability from a B2B perspective is really important because they just care about solving the problem. They're not so interested in like the tech aspect as we are. Sorry, Ben, you had a question there. I cut across.
Well, I did, yes. But this actually is a question specifically for you, Abraham. We spoke at the top of the show just about sort of you needing to be warmed up to the idea of coming in and using Kadena. And I'm always interested to speak to people with a sort of technical background, about their experience of using it, and why it was such a great choice for what you guys are doing.
Right. So just based on my experience with Ethereum back in 2017, at that time, what we did was a ERC20 token that we basically used the CryptoPunks contract. Matt and John basically were very generous and helped us a lot to get our contract done. The main thing that we added to that contract, other than working with editions, was the enforcement of royalties. Basically, when we added royalties, it made it a little bit more difficult to be traded normally, how you will normally do it, another ERC20 token, because we were requiring a value to be transferred with the ID of the token that you wanted to transfer. Then we upgraded to ERC 721, and we went down again and doubled back on basically enforcing royalties on the transfer function, and we made the contract basically non-usable by marketplaces. We try to get marketplaces to play with us and try to get to, in a way, introduce into the standard the royalties being enforced by the contract, but it wasn't a priority for marketplaces at that point. There was a huge boom of NFT sales, and they were getting, everything for them, basically. I spent a couple of years, perhaps, away from blockchain. And then Adam came and contacted me and told me about DNA, about Kadena. And I asked them, I need a couple of weeks to check this blockchain, because I never had heard before about Kadena. And it was a bit daunting at first because of the language pact, but eventually it came to me that it was based on Lisp. I read about it too, and it was a language that at some point in college I perhaps had a class or two just to see, just to know about these old languages that were precursors for more modern ones. But then Marmalade, when I started looking into Marmalade, a lot of the problems that we faced, at least in my startup, trying to enforce royalties on transfer, were already solved, were already basically not entirely solved, but were at least outlined into what policies will be on Marmalade. So a lot of the security aspects of the contract, a lot of the enforceability of the contract was the actual catalyzer that let me know, or that moved me into saying, these guys want to build, we can build with Kadena.
Yeah, it's great. I think when we speak to people that sort of understand the technology, we hear a very similar thing. It's just that they've sort of solved the problems which people have been trying to solve within the industry for some time, as particularly scalability as well. And I think for people that are building decentralized applications, or applications that are going to be used by large amounts of people, scalability is obviously one of the biggest things. I guess I'd love to talk to you guys as well about just your roadmap and kind of what's coming over the next sort of 3 to 6 months. Just talk us through kind of what you guys are releasing.
Yeah, so we're working, on these different pilots at the moment. The end goal is to have something, in sort of like a 6-month horizon that's more commoditized, that people can sign up on the website and start using. But in the meantime, we're just working on different projects on a project by project basis. We have quite a long pipeline and just looking to add features and just kind of formalize the end product. It's a space that's moving at a great pace. And as more and more people kind of get their heads around it, and more companies realize that adoption is starting to happen, it's changing the goalposts a little bit. I would say every quarter or so. So right now we're working just on beefing up the security and making sure that the token also has more experiential aspects. So we're working on like 3D for the token, so that you can also have a 3D version of your product. And then we're also looking at kind of more of the CRM aspects where, servicing, so keeping track of servicing on the token, but also, the ability to kind of contact your customer and offer them at least, access to drops or, something experiential or even invitations to events. So, we're quite excited. We have a lot of work to do.
With people using kind of resale markets and selling products, if you sort of think about the fashion industry specifically, obviously brands can go ahead and create these tokens and will encourage consumers to kind of sell them in line with the physical product. Do you sort of foresee any problems around the physical product being sold without necessarily the transference of the token happening? And do you have any idea about how you sort of make sure that that's happening when the transaction takes place?
Yeah, so this is something we give a lot of thought to, and obviously it comes also with customer behavior, right? The best example I can give in kind of the current world is Rolex, right? Where you have two prices for items when you buy a Rolex. You have the one that comes with all the papers and kind of like the track record of it. Same with secondhand cars that are collectible. And then you have those that come with no papers, right? Where you have no idea of the servicing and all that. And generally they trade at a discount. So right. I think that you probably will see that where when it's known that a certain brand is always, creating tokens for these physical items, then it will become customer habit to think, well, you just send me your product, but where's my token, right? So if you can't guarantee it, then I'm not paying the full price. So I think that in itself will become kind of a behavior. But ultimately, like we have, security measures in place as well, where, if at some point you see that there's a velocity in the product that's not, mirrored by the token, someone being cheeky because they know that by owning the token, the brand will give them certain benefits and just doesn't pass it off. If you can, if there is a way to figure that out, and there's certain ways you can do it, with cameras and stuff like that. But yeah, we just would look to either burn the token or take it out of circulation, right? So there are certain stopgaps for that, but I think that the biggest thing, that will kind of make it habit is a change in the customer habit, and this idea that actually if I bought from brand X without a token, then it might not be authentic, or it's just not worth the same.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very behavioral. The clients, the customers, the end customers, they'll eventually just request, like, I'm going to buy for you, but you have to transfer me the token. Otherwise, like, I don't want it. You wouldn't buy a car right now without the papers, for instance.
When that transaction happens, are you looking to combine the transfer of the ownership token with the payment? So I buy a Rolex from you, Abraham, and it's 20,000, and I just make that payment, then automatically I get the title and the proof of ownership.
So the integration is with the brand, right? So that their point of sale. So they have that interaction with their customer, and then they send it to their customer either during or post transaction. For the jeweler, for instance, for them, it's a convenience, because ultimately when you buy that, you get, you tend to get gem reports and other sort of warranties and stuff. So for them, they can just put that on the blockchain. And then, they were saying, a few of the jewelers we talked to say, like it's an issue because people come back 15 years later and we just don't have the storage to keep all this stuff, right? So for them, it's just part of that, like transaction, and the whole goal is to give them the tools so that they can integrate that into their sales process.
What would you say has been the most challenging thing that you've experienced in terms of building this so far?
I think Abraham could spend the next 36 minutes or do a whole podcast on that. Ultimately, when you're working on the blockchain, is you're kind of making a forever product. because you can't change the blockchain. Right. So you really have to have a lot of foresight in what you do. And that's why we're extremely privileged with Abraham here. As I told you guys earlier, we call him Walls because he's an absolute builder. He's a bearded, happy fella. And, he loves the challenge of building, and he really is an architect. He worked on security structures for insurance. So he really, thinks about the kind of long-term effects, and, has to think how bad actors are going to take advantage of it. So I think that's the biggest challenge, is that, if you're making the next Facebook, you can have 1,000 iterations whilst, as soon as our customers start minting, those tokens are out there. So, we can improve the product and we can improve the service and we can add more features, but that token will never change. And that's kind of the whole point. And that can be very challenging.
I would also add to that we started building, obviously, back in November. The world was a very different place to what it is today. Particularly, obviously business environment. Some brands are more suspect of, or more suspicious of cryptos and blockchain now than they were back end of last year. But we see that as an opportunity, to be honest. But I would say, obviously, that it requires a bit more education from our perspective now than potentially when there was a lot. There was more of a spotlight on the blockchain industry back then.
Yeah, I think you're right. We talk on the show often about how sadly blockchain, Web3 and crypto and Bitcoin kind of all get lumped in with the same sort of news stories. And sadly, it only takes an incident like, the Terra Luna incident a couple of months back just to sort of, drive the whole thing into a bit of a tailspin. And, I think sentiment is kind of at an all-time low. But as you say, I think for people that are building in this space, it's actually a great opportunity because you can kind of just go into stealth mode, build out your product, ready for the launch when the hype inevitably comes back, whether that's 2024 or 25. I actually just wanted to ask you guys a question about sort of your experience of building, because we've got a lot of people that listen to the show that are currently sort of starting their journey with building Web3 products or, founding a company. And I wondered if you kind of had any advice for those people having sort of come some way on your journey already. How would you get started and what's really worked for you?
Well, for me, at least on the development side, so when we started building this, Marmali was also being built, and it's still being built. There are things that haven't been completed yet, but it's pretty much usable and functional. Perhaps I'm gonna sound a little bit like that Simpsons meme, old man yelling at
It's one of my favorite memes.
But yeah, back in the day when I started in college programming, all you had to do is press F1, and there you had the documentation of whatever language you were using to program. Documentation has been definitely weakness on Kadena, at least, but they're working on that. They're helping on that. The community, I'm not very used to going and ask. I think there is a lot of noise when you go and use a Discord or a Telegram group for, getting help for any blockage that you encounter. But it's there. The community, that's a good thing too. The community is very helpful. It takes a little bit more of time, so I guess you have to, arm yourself with a little bit more of patience. And to be honest, a good thing is that everything is on the Kadena GitHub. A lot of the things that we've done, a lot of the things we've developed, we just have gone to the GitHub and look for the code that they have there posted publicly, and basically do dissect the code and understand what they're doing and how they're doing it, and then we go and replicate or do any modifications we need for what we're trying to solve. But yeah, I think it's gonna get there. Regarding documentation, they're working on that, and I hope that's gonna be a very good improvement, and hopefully it's gonna drive more developers into Kadena too.
Yeah, it's great advice, Abraham. I think that's something that we've heard before with documentation and Kadena, but I think, it's relatively early days for the Kadena team, and I know that they're working hard behind the scenes to sort of fill in those gaps. So, more to come from them for sure.
It's such an exciting blockchain, though. And I mean, to answer your question, I would say build on Kadena, and secondly, dream big, because I think there's so many things that the blockchain can solve. I mean, it's just think about it. Everything is information, and basically the blockchain is a database, right? Like our world works on information. So I think there's just so much more to do in the space, and that Web3 is kind of the tip of the iceberg. I really think that in 5-10 years, we're going to interact with the blockchains and blockchain in so many different ways that we can't even conceive today. So there's a lot of work to be done, and I think what's very compelling about Kadena is that it's, well, for one, Stuart and Will, always kind of looked at it from a real world perspective. And I think that's extremely important for blockchain to be able to have mass adoption. It needs to really solve real world use cases. And, I think that building in Kadena basically is, even with some of the issues that Abraham has mentioned, it's kind of taking an investment in the future, because I think proof of work is the way to go. If you're a crypto adept, basically central banks are proof of stake. So proof of work is the way forward, and layer one and scalability is really an extremely important leap in the next kind of generation of what we can do on the blockchain.
Just to sort of wrap up the show today, we've got a question which we like to ask all of our guests, and it's not sort of specifically related to DNA, but it's just sort of the wider space. And I wonder if there's anyone in particular in the sort of blockchain or crypto space that's been particularly inspirational to you guys in sort of getting you started on your journey.
Well, I would say Abraham for sure, because he planted the seed in 2017, which I thought he was completely crazy, and then he proved me wrong, and now we're working together. I have to kind of throw Stuart and Will into that as well, for two reasons. Firstly, because those guys convinced Jamie Dimon, like the biggest crypto critic, to hire them at JP Morgan.
Yeah, that
which
was,
I think is unbelievable, and a massive validation to their skill and abilities. And then also, the fact that they, jumped out of that ship and decided to build something with real world use cases. So I think there are a lot of stars in the crypto market, but those three have my respect and admiration daily.
Yeah, nice. I think they've, what they've built is incredibly impressive. And as you rightly said, to convince Jamie Dimon, who I think was one of the biggest critics of the whole space at the time, to give them a job was nothing short of a miracle.
You gotta respect that, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, got to respect the hustle. And same to you, Abraham and Douglas. I mean, is there anyone in particular that you sort of look to in the space that is particularly inspiring?
Well, I have so many people. It's just going to be one of those Oscar speech.
I want to say thanks to my mum, my dad.
Indeed. No, I mean, I guess. Well, my former partners, they're still doing with my previous startup. They're doing a lot of amazing, progressive, revolutionary things. So I definitely admire them. Matt and John from CryptoPunks, they were amazing. They were very generous. So and I'm always going to be grateful to them because it helped me to get really fast into what we were trying to do at that time. Jason Bailey is a guy that it's really into art and fighting for the artist. And also an amazing thinker, and of course Will and Stuart. When I started digging into Kadena, it was every single time that I got a breakthrough understanding something that they were doing was basically a signal for me to say, yeah, I definitely have to work on this blockchain. And it is possible to do what we are trying to do with it. So, yeah.
From my perspective, I mean, obviously, I've been an early investor in Kadena, and I'm still relatively new to the blockchain world. So I would probably say Jude and Will, because I truly believe they have a long-term vision. They don't get distracted by the noise, the bearish, the bullish market. They see themselves being here in 10, 20 years' time. So they really are building the blockchain for the future. So that's kind of my inspiration, and that's obviously part of the reason why we decided to build on Kadena, is because we really believe in them. I also believe in Woz as well. And Adam, and even my partners, which is also equally.
It's important. I would say that's key, right?
Yeah.
Really key. Well, that's cool. Lots of love for Stuart and Will. So just for our listeners that are interested in kind of finding out more about what you guys are building, maybe want to come and support you, where can they find you? What's the web address and what are your socials?
Website is thedna.tech, and our socials. Probably the best medium is on Twitter. It's at thedna.tech. We're also on Instagram, which is the same handle, and we are on Medium as well. At the DNA.tech. We're actually starting a PR campaign.
At the DNA Tech, not dot. It's
Sorry,
at the DNA Tech.
We'll put the links in the show notes.
You can see Douglas does a lot of our social media, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, I'd encourage people to go and follow you and check you out. Maybe we could get you back on the show in 9 months or so, maybe 12 months time, just to see where you're at with this, because it's always interesting to follow people's journeys and stories about how, what's happened over, a longer period of time. So, what they say is like a year in crypto is like 7 years in normal industry, isn't it? It's like dog years. So, yeah, we're excited to see where this goes. I think you've picked a really interesting set of problems to solve, and wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Kevin, Ben. It's been a pleasure to be here, and we're big fans of what you guys are doing. So we'd love to be back in 9 months, and it's been great fun.
Thank you.
Super.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. It would mean the world to us if you could leave a review wherever you're listening. This really does help and allows other people to find us online. You can keep up to date with new releases of the podcast by subscribing and following us on Twitter or Instagram for the latest crypto-related news. Information provided by Crypto Pulse via this podcast, website, social media channels, and any other medium does not constitute financial advice, investment recommendations, or any other type of advice whatsoever. The Crypto Pulse team are not professional financial advisors. Trading and purchasing cryptocurrencies do carry risks, and anybody wishing to partake in such activities should seek professional advice.